Well, thank you very much. It's a great honor to be appointed to give the opening lecture, which is a very heavy responsibility. I hope I will not disappoint you while I'm going to give just a talk, not really an academic paper presentation. I'm going to tell a story, my story with the Qur'an, if it is possible. And I hope you can acknowledge this narrative as something that can be part of this very, very highly academic conference. Well, since a very early period in my time, I'm not going to use this PowerPoint because I have to look back all the time myself. Yeah, and I'm not going even to use my text. I will do my best to do without these things. First of all, because in the title here is I'm dealing with the Quran in its present order, the Mus'haf order, or how it is called the Tartib al-Tilawa, the order of the recitation of the Quran, as opposed to Tartib al-Nuzul, the chronological order of the Quran. I have been wondering for some time why Muslims, why the first generation, the companions of the Prophet, or the Tabi'een, whatever, where you place historically the codification of the Quran, because I know this is a debated issue between scholars. Why did they go on and make this kind of arrangement? Why they put the chapters, the longer at the beginning and the shorter at the end? Why didn't you? Because they knew, we have information, they knew about the chronological order, the Makki and the Madani. Why didn't they put in the chronological order? It's a hypothetical question, but I think it's a question that might explain something here. And I look to the Quran in its chronological order, how would it look like if the Quran is arranged in this? It would be like, a story of the life of Muhammad, story of the life of the early community. So this would not really reflect any kind of divine message. This is one thing. The other thing that I can think about, that maybe early Muslim didn't want the Quran to be like the Bible, because the Bible, it starts with Exodus, with Genesis, and then go on like a book of history. So they did want to make a distinction between the structure of the Bible, maybe, and the structure of the Quran. There is another thing to add, and I'm thinking loudly now, that why didn't they name it the book? I mean, the book is a very present name of the Quran. This is the book, ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابِ, in so many instances. Why did they call it Mus'haf? And probably, again, I'm thinking, probably because they wanted to distinguish the new community from the communities of the books, Ahl al-Kitab, probably. But anyway, I'm going to deal with the Quran in its present order, as it is used in everyday life in Muslim communities, because this is the Quran that has produced or reproduced a new culture, the culture that we know now as the Islamic culture. This is also can explain to me the difference between non-Muslim approach to the Quran and Muslims' approach to the Quran. Muslims' approach to the Quran focus on the issue of meaning, of course, without neglecting the issues of structure, of historicity, of linguistics, of the form, but the focus of interest for Muslim scholars from the very beginning until now is the question of meaning. meaning of life in general, and how the meaning of life in which every Muslim community live is connected to the meaning of the Qur'an, or how the meaning of the Qur'an can contribute to formulating the meaning of life in every specific historical moment. Then I go to the question about Quranic worldview. Would the Quran contain a coherent worldview or not? Can Muslims, construct a worldview of the Quran or not, with all the contradictions that we find in almost all themes of the Quran? We find contradiction in the legal rules, contradictions in the way the divine is presented. Sometimes the divine is presented as tanzih, absolute transcendence. And sometimes it's presented as with corporal features, like eye, like hand. So we have two seemingly conflicting images of the divine. We have the same problem with issues like human free will or predestination. You can find support in the Quran for human free will, and you can find support in the Quran for determination and predestination. We have all these problems that theologians and jurists tried to tackle, and this is the important aspect of the history of Islamic culture, whether we speak about fiqh, or we speak about theology, or we speak about philosophy. Probably only in mysticism that they tried to catch all the tension together. Would the existence of such contradiction or conflict or intention allow scholars to speak about Quranic worldview? Worldview, I have to teach worldview, Islamic worldview in the University of Humanistics. And the question of the worldview of the Quran came to my mind just 5 years ago. And since then I have been busy with this question, whether the Quran contains a coherent worldview, or just we have to take these parts and bring them together and reconstruct worldview. And I'm going to tell you the story here. I mean, as a child in the Kutab, in the village, in Egypt, in the Delta, I have to memorize the Quran to start with. And in the Kutab, in order to understand something about the Quran we memorize, we have to learn something about the dogma, about Tawheed. And of course, it was very easy taught to us that God does not sleep, does not eat, and he lam yalid wa lam yulad. Of course, but for a child, this was very difficult. Lam yalid wa lam yulad. And when I was a child, I was also thinking about how come lam yalid wa lam yulad? This is impossible. And more difficult when the inspector that comes from the Ministry of Education to the Kutab to decide if the government would continue subsidizing financially the Kutab or not. The inspector has to check on the children. So the inspector was very wise. He had to make some trap to the children, and he just directs the question, what does God eat? So we all get to the answer, and of course, he eats the best food in our village. And so we all, failed the sheikh, the arif, because the question was not whether God eats or not, but what does God eat? So more than that, puzzling was this لم يلد ولم يولد, لم يلد ولم يولد for me. I couldn't understand that an existence just happened from nothing. Growing up a little bit, reading the Quran also, I found this very interesting. We have a discussion last day on dinner. I mean, the conference started yesterday already, which was very, very, very fruitful. When the Arabs of Quraysh, believed that the angels, al-malaika, is females, and they were the females of God, girls of God, banatullah, daughters of God, the Quran was very angry. أَلَكُمُ الذَّكَرُ وَلَهُ الْأُنْثَى? This is what you mean? You ascribe, males to yourself and females to God. تلك إذن قسمة, whatever, Diza or Sira, as it was suggested yesterday. But the Quran also gave the angels a very, very important mission. Angels are the mediator between heaven and earth. They bring down Amrullah, whatever Amr is. تتنزل الملائكة والروح بأمره من عند ربهم. So in fact, the malaika, the angels, has a very important role in the Quran. So the issue here is not about the malaika, but about, or about ascribing femaleness to the malaika, but because the Arabs preferred males to the extent that they committed female genocide. That is the reaction of the Quran, to ascribe for them the males and then the females. But the worldly view of the Quran, if I can use this, is not so far away from the pre-Islamic worldly view. There are a lot of shared elements between pre-Islamic and Islamic, including this world of the angels that fill the space between heaven and the earth. More than that, the angels, Jibreel, is the carrier of revelation. Even evil, Iblis, was one of the angels, according to the Quranic narrative. So it could be evil and good, part of this filling the space between heaven and between earth, between divinity or the world of divinity and the world of humanness. As a child, this was my questions. And grown up in Egypt, and between the 50s, I was born in the 40s, between the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s in Egypt, the meaning of religion, the meaning of Islam have changed 180 degrees. Absolutely. I mean, in the 60s, you find hundreds of books about Quran and socialism. Quran and social justice. Quran and nationalism. Okay, so the Quran spoke the language of nationalism and socialism, even with Muslim Brotherhood. I mean, the very well-known Syrian Muslim Brotherhood wrote a book about al-Islam wal-Ishtirakiyya. At that time, only Amin al-Khoury rejected this kind of, bullying the meaning of the Quran into this ideology or that ideology, but this was very easy. In the 70s, where the political situation in Egypt changed, then Islam became a religion to protect private property against nationalization, a religious of peace, to have Camp David Treaty with Israel. Before that, it was a religion of jihad against imperialism, against Zionism. But now it has to shift to be a religion of peace. So now I was grown up, the question of meaning became more confusing in my mind. What is the meaning of Islam? I was, of course, so here I was in favor of the meaning of Islam as a religion of justice, a religion of socialism, not necessarily socialism in the proper sense, because this is the way the meaning of Islam I was brought in. So this was confusing, and at that moment I started to be a student in the university and started my Islamic study. So I came to Islamic study loaded with these questions that coming from my childhood and from my experience as a citizen in Egypt about the meaning of Islam, the meaning of religion. And therefore I went into my research carrying the question about the meaning. The meaning of Islam is the Islam of Sharia. This was Muslim Brotherhood. Sharia has to be implemented, immediately implemented. Or Islam as an open worldview that can accommodate rationalism, accommodate modern political system, modern values like freedom, like rationality, etc., etc. This was the conflicting worldviews in Egypt and to a great extent in the Arabic world and in the Muslim world about two worldviews concerning the meaning of Islam. I carried these questions with me to make my study, and then I started by studying the Mu'tazila approach of the Qur'an, the rational, the book الاتجاه العقلي في التفسير. And I don't want to tell you the story about the Mu'tazila. I think you all know about the story of the Mu'tazila. But the most important thing I have to mention here is they have to insist on making the Qur'an speak their own 5 principles. And in enforcing the Qur'an to do that, they took the division that there is some in the Qur'an in chapter 3, verse 7 about there is muhkam and there is mutashabih, there is clear and there is ambiguous in the Qur'an. They took it to the letter, and therefore they divided the Qur'an into clear and ambiguous. So all the passages that speak their own principles were considered muhkam, clear. All passages that contradict their own philosophy were considered ambiguous. And by this, they established the first hermeneutical principle in the history of Islam. And this was taken by their opponent. But the muhkam, according to the Mu'tazila, became mutashabih, according to the Hanbalis, and vice versa. Because of course in the Qur'an it said we did not say which is muhkam and which is mutashabih. The verse itself is ambiguous to the extent that they have so many different opinions about where to start with the sentence. If we start at the end of وَمَا يَعْلَمُ تَأْوِيلَهُ إِلَّا اللَّهُ, and then we start a new sentence. Or we can say وَمَا يَعْلَمُ تَأْوِيلَهُ إِلَّا اللَّهُ وَالرَّاسِخُونَ فِي الْعِلْمِ, which means that الرَّاسِخُونَ فِي الْعِلْمِ also knows the ta'wil. So if the text itself, according to which they constructed their hermeneutical view, is ambiguous, so the entire system is ambiguous itself. And the conclusion I reached this was my MA thesis, that the Qur'an became a battlefield for theologians to fight each other on the ground of the Qur'an. And then I decided, okay, this was theology. Theology, as we all know, is very much came emerged from within the political and military conflict between early Muslim groups, starting from the Battle of Jamal to the Battle of Siffin. So we know that everything started from there. The Khawarij started the question of who is the good Muslim and who is not the good Muslim. So we know that theology emerged within political context. So it is loaded with political and ideological elements in its structure. So I thought mysticism is free of that. At least this is very spiritual, ethical. So I took Ibn Arabi to my PhD degree, and with all my admiration of the Mu'tazila when I was working on my thesis, my admiration of Ibn Arabi while I was working with Ibn Arabi, because we know when we work in some topic, we got absorbed by the topic. Sometimes we need some time to get out, to look at the topic from a neutral position. It was the same. Ibn Arabi was not that free of the impact of the problem in which he lived, the problem of Reconquista in Spain, and then the problem of the wars in the East when he left Spain to the East. So the entire Muslim world was under, scattering power. Ibn Arabi here was so aware of these problems, and he tried in his philosophy to reconstruct a utopia. At the end of my book, I said, well, Ibn Arabi left the entire world behind his back and went on to build a utopia of unity, of love, of peace. But this did not solve the problems of the world. So anyway, this took me to the third question. I mean, if the Qur'an has become so vulnerable to be interpreted this direction or that direction, to be taken so highly spiritually, or to be taken to the ground so politically, what is the meaning of the Qur'an? What are the text? And this took me to the question, the text. My third book, the concept of the text. Anyway, I'm not going to go into the detail of these books, but again, I return it back to questions. So the moment I make research, I come with new questions. And while I think I'm solving some questions, I'm again, jumping to new questions. And maybe this is maybe this is our destiny as a scholar. Okay, probably we don't, if we just find, an end to our work and we reach certainty, we stop to be scholars anymore. So it's sign of death. I hope we won't reach this. Again, the question of the Qur'an. Of course, in this book, I was dealing with the Qur'an as a text. I emphasized the textual characteristics of the Qur'an. It's a text. Textual analysis should be applied to the Qur'an. And I was so strong in this claim, to the extent that people who do not want to give the Qur'an any modern name were very angry to call the Qur'an a text. Someone have told me, no one in the world, no one in our ancestors called the Qur'an Nas. So this was like a bid'ah. But within this definition of the Qur'an as a text, I added two other bid'ahs. Well, in fact, not bid'ahs, crimes. It's a historical text. And it is a cultural product. Oh my God, cultural product. Of course, explaining what does it mean, historical text, and explaining what does it mean cultural product will not protect you from, in any place in the Muslim world, from being persecuted. Okay, cultural product in itself is a crime. And even the rest of the phrase, it became producer of a new culture, was almost forgotten on the debate. But anyway, being aware of the Quran as a historical text and trying afterward, my research afterward, to go to find the way between the Quranic historicity and the possibility, the option of the possibility of the Quran to produce meaning beyond the moment of its historical emergence. Because this is a phenomenon. I mean, well, we know that the Quran emerged in the 7th century. The Quran has so many indications about that, and the Quran was involved in so many conversations and discussions and debate with previous scriptures and with the societies in which, but nevertheless, it became a source of meaning after the 7th century. It is still the source of meaning in the 21st century. And therefore, we are in another form of tension between the fact, the historical fact of the Quran, and the demand of deducing meaning from the Quran for Muslims. I think this tension between the historicity of the Quran and the divinity of the Quran, the possibility of producing meaning and reproducing meaning, this tension we can find in all the disciplines, in fiqh, in philosophy, in theology, in mysticism, etc., etc. So the question was not solved. Okay, it was not solved whether the Quran contained a coherent worldview or not. I went on my study to search for whether Muslims try to find worldview in the Quran, and I found yes. I mean, the fuqaha tried that, philosophers tried that, theologians tried that, and the mystics also, Sufis, tried that. We have different worldviews ascribed to the Quran. If I take in the field of fiqh, jurisprudence, okay, first of all, they have to deduce from the Quran certain ruling. If the Quran and the Sunnah does not give a ruling about any specific thing, and they have to use qiyas. Okay. But later on, they have to seek for deeper principles according to which they can return to the details, the furu', and to apply whether this ruling is in accordance with these principles or not. And they reach it, I think this was in the 5th century, Ghazali started it, al-maqasid al-kulliyya, the utmost objectives of the Quran. And you know that this maqasid is 5. Okay, preservation of life, preservation of property, preservation of dignity, and preservation of religion and sanity. So 5 principles. So they found this is the utmost objectives of Sharia, in the interest of the human being and the interest of human communities. Of course, Shatibi gave it more detailed nuances to this worldview. But critically approaching this worldview, I could say, and I could be wrong, that all these 5 objectives are deduced from the penal code of the Quran. This is punishment against killing, preservation of life. Punishment against theft is preservation of property. Punishment against adultery or fornication is dignity. Prohibition of alcohol consumption is for insanity. Protection of religion, the fuqaha added, ridda. This is killing of the murtad. Could we deduce from the penal code of the Quran a Quranic worldview? And I found myself again in a very unsatisfactory position, especially historically speaking here. And this is again the tension between the meaning and the historicity, that all of these penal codes are pre-Quranic. They are mentioned in the Quran. They are not genuinely Quranic. Of course, punishment is intended for another objective. So the punishment itself is not objective. Anyway, I turned my way to the theologians, and I found, I mean, this was my early scholarship about theology, about philosophy. And I found in Ibn Rushd a possibility or a more advanced possibility. And I found, in fact, some detailed construction of Quranic worldview in Ibn Rushd. Ibn Rushd is well known, but there is not much investigation done on the deep level of his discussion with the theologians, on the deep level of his hermeneutics. It is not as simple as we find in the Mu'tazila, that in any contradiction, majaz or metaphor would solve the problem. In Ibn Rushd, it's more deep than that. In Ibn Rushd, the Quranic worldview is the same Aristotelian worldview. It's the philosophical worldview. Okay. If the Quran is silent, then philosophy is to explain. If the Quran is ambiguous, its philosophy has to disambiguate. If the Quran is uncertain, we should keep it uncertain to protect the iman, the belief of the masses. But it should be interpreted according to the Burhan, according to the philosophy in the books of philosophy, not to be allowed to the masses. When in my youth, I used to accuse Ibn Rushd of, being non-democratic in knowledge, but I think now I can understand his position. It has nothing to do with democracy. It has to do with how, because Ibn Rushd was not only a philosopher, he was a lawyer, a jurist, and he was a physician. And if you think about Ibn Rushd, being, a physician, busy with the human mind, with the human disease, a philosopher busy with the intellectual disease, and a man of law. There is more in Ibn Rushd that we have to investigate. In his book about law, Bidayat al-Mujtahid wa Nihayat al-Muqtasid, which is a very, very important book, the aim of the book, in my analysis, is to show even within the realm of fiqh, the diversity of opinion based on the ambiguity of the text. This is not explicit. But why Ibn Rushd, who was a Maliki by right, go to this fiqh al-ikhtilaf, the fiqh of divergent? And in every issue, he gave the opinion of all the madhahib, even the madhahib that does not reach us now, and show what is in the text according to which they have different interpretation, whether the text is a Quranic text or a prophetic tradition. So if we combine his in his trilogy, this is Fasl al-Maqal, Manahij al-Adilla, and the Damima, with his book in fiqh, and we can find that according to Ibn Rushd, uncertainty is a very important feature in Sharia. Okay, there is a level of silent, a level of uncertainty, a level of ambiguity. Ambiguity, it could be explained by metaphor, but uncertainty could not be solved. It could be solved by philosophy, but it should not be solved and dismantled, distributed to everyone. And he gave, very, very deep insight about, for example, the eternal of the world. According to Ibn Rushd, there is no single proof in the Qur'an that the world was created from nothing. And he quotes the Qur'an to show وَكَانَ عَرْشُهُ عَلَى الْمَاءِ, that there is a primary material from which the entire world existed. So there is nothing here. So according to Ibn Rushd, even on the level of the apparent, on the level of the zahir, okay, you can reach this deep knowledge without ta'wil. But for ta'wil, there is a deeper level that should be kept for the philosophers. According to my modern knowledge, about Ibn Rushd, he was not against the Amma. On the contrary, he was against theologians. Theologians, according to him, have disturbed the faith of the Amma when they distributed a false interpretation called ta'wil about the sifat, the attributes of God, etc., etc. So there is here trying to establish a parallel worldview that is in accordance with the philosophical worldview according to the time of Ibn Rushd. Okay, there is no contradiction. How could be contradiction while Sharia and Falsafa, Burhan, are two sisters? Not two sisters who were brought up from the same breast milk. في الرضاعة. Okay. Now I'm not going to go if it is dual truth or one truth expressed in different ways, because this is another debate. But deeply going to Ibn Rushd, I think he provided us with a more deep hermeneutics that need to be explicated in our modern time. To go to mysticism, it's more ambiguous, it's more uncertain. Well, Ibn Arabi used at least two metaphors to explain the world in which we live, about truth, whether it is in the text or on the cosmos. Because according to Ibn Arabi, the cosmos is a text, kalimatullah. Okay, of course, he depends on Surah Al-Kahf, قُلْ لَوْ كَانَ الْبَحْرُ مِدَادًا لِكَلِمَاتِ رَبِّي. If all the trees of the earth and all the oceans, if all the oceans are ink, all the trees are pen, the words of God cannot be exhausted. So the cosmos is the words of God, cosmological word, and the Quran is the words of God. Both are ambiguous, uncertain. And the definition of truth is either truth is compared to water. Water has no color, no shape, but it takes the shape of the vessel and the color of the vessel. So it only takes shape and color when it is in specific vessel. So it's the vessel that give the shape and give the color. Or the serpent. The serpent's skin can take the color of any environment. If it is green, it's green. If it is yellow, it is yellow. If it is dark, it is dark. So there is no clear truth. Truth is always connected to the experience of the individual or the experience of the community. The relativization of truth is what made Ibn Arabi and Islamic mysticism so distinctive. More than that, the grades of existence are 4 grades. The grades of the meaning of the Quran are 4 grades as well. the zahir, the apparent, the batin, and then the matla', and then the hudud. It's even the translation of these concepts are very, very difficult. The zahir, the apparent, the batin, the external, the exosterial, I don't know how to, and then the matla', the had, and the matla'. So 4 levels that does exist in every letter, not only in every sentence, but in every letter in the Quran. So just looking this kind of, bird look to the field of jurisprudence, of theology, of philosophy, of mysticism, that you can find the dominance of the concept of uncertainty, of ambiguity. Very, very little is clear in the Quran. According to the very earlier fuqaha, what is very clear in the Quran and very clear in the prophetic tradition is called nas. So they make distinction between the nas and the mubham and the mu'awwal. So it's and they add to that an-nususu aziza, very rare, which means there's so many clear. Shafi'i give one example for this nas in the Quran. One example for those who does not have the possibility to have a sacrifice animal in the Hajj. They are asked to make 10 days fasting. 3 أيام في الحج وسبعة إذا رجعتم. And the Quran adds تلك عشرة كاملة, which means even the Quran did not leave it to the reader to add 3 to 7. Okay, that just makes it very, very clear. Because if it is ثلاثة في الحج وسبعة إذا رجعتم, maybe you cannot, make it. So this is the example Shafi'i in his Risala gave for the Nas, the very clear. In Suyuti, which is very late than Shafi'i, he say that even حرمت عليكم أمهاتكم is not a Nas. It is not clear. Because you have to suppose there is an omitted thing in the thing. حرم عليكم نكاح أمهاتكم. So as long as you have to add something omitted here, it is not clear, it is not certain, it is not obvious. So if we take all these statements about the Nas, the rarity, and the word aziza in Arabic means very, very rare. So the clear, even in the legal system, are very, very rare. Uncertainty in philosophy, uncertainty so it's uncertainty. Would I say, this is a question, big question, that the Quran have a worldly view, but a worldly view of uncertainty? This is contradiction. A worldly view should be very clear. Well, then I would add something here. If the Quran or in scripture, because I'm not talking about the Quran now, about scripture. If the Quran and in scripture was very clear, then it is a historical document. It has no power, semantic power, beyond its historical moment. It could not produce meaning outside the historical context. When language wanted to produce meaning outside the historical context, it should contain ambiguity. It should contain certain level of uncertainty. I think scriptures lived, and they will continue to live, regardless of all our efforts to imprison them in their historical context by our analysis. Cutting the frog in 2 pieces. Okay, I liked very much this metaphor. Scriptures have the power to live because they are not, and they were not, and they will never be clear. They are clear now in this moment for this Muslim community or that Muslim community. Okay, but their clearness is just temporal, because the moment the historical context changed, ambiguity emerges again and again and again, and this is the power of the text. A worldview, there is elements of constituents of worldview, elements of worldviews that have to be reconstructed most of the time. So there is a worldview in the Quran, but we have to read the Quran not in this segmental, fragmented way that has been done so far. All the levels that could be found in one passage, even one passage about divorce, we can find a dimension of ethical and spiritual. When the Quran speaks about divorce, and then add to this bil ma'ruf, bil ihsan. Divorce is a dramatic moment in the family affair. People are leaving each other, but the Quran is demanding this kind of separation to be done in ma'ruf and in ihsan. So adding ethical and spiritual dimension within the classical. The fuqaha did not read all these kind of so many levels are interwoven together in the Quranic passages. This reading, I think, is still waiting for scholars to do. Thank you.